Hello again. This time I will be discussing to you the several books of the Labor Code of the Philippines. As you know, there are 7 books of the Labor Code of the Philippines. The book 1 will be the one that I will be discussing to you, which is the policies on pre-employment. And this policies on pre-employment starts with declaration of states' labor policies. Well, it's just a reiteration of the 1987 Constitution on the promotion of full employment through improved manpower, training, allocation, and utilization of these human resources. Also, labor protects workers and secure them the best terms, conditions, and benefits of employment. And through the agent, particularly the Secretary of Labor and Employment, facilitates the free choice of available employment in the workplace. He or she also regulates the movement of workers, the employment of aliens within the Philippines, protect our local employees instead of invading us, the rationalization of the private sectors in the privatization or in the participation of recruitment and placement in the Philippines. Last but not the least, to ensure the careful selection of Filipino workers for overseas employment in order to maintain the dignity of the Philippines with its relationship or foreign relations with other host or hosting countries. Article 13 relates to the definition of several terms which we will be using in discussing recruitment and placement. Definition of worker. What is worker? Worker is the labor force within the Philippines, whether they are employed or unemployed. If you are without the Philippines, you become an overseas Filipino contract workers. Of course, you belong also to the labor force whether you're employed without or unemployed without the Philippines. Then, the definition of recruitment and placement. What is recruitment and placement? It is any act of canvassing, enlisting, contracting, transporting, utilizing, hiring, and even procuring workers. That includes referrals, contract services, promotion, or advertisement or advertising for a fee, whether for profit or not, whether locally or abroad, provided that when you offer or promises for a fee to 2 or more persons shall be deemed to be considered as recruitment and placement. In fact, even in the decision of the Supreme Court, particularly with the case of People of the Philippines versus Spanish, GR number 58674, July 1, 1990, wherein even one person is being promised or being offered a fee for recruitment and placement without the Philippines shall be deemed as such. There is also the definition of private fee charging employment agency. This private fee charging employment agency are those engaged in the recruitment and placement without the Philippines, and they should be provided with the license issued by the Philippine Overseas Employment Administration. On the other hand, there is also this private recruitment entity. This private recruitment entity is the one that recruit and place workers abroad, at first without a fee. But later on, when you're already working abroad, they will charge you, and it will be taken a portion of your salary or wage without the Philippines. Another is the definition of overseas employment. What is overseas employment? It is an employment of worker outside or without the Philippines, who are seafarers, or in the old law we call them seamen or seaman. These are the persons employed in a vessel which are engaged in maritime navigation. Another term is an immigrant. Who is an immigrant? The one who immigrates to a foreign country by virtue of an immigrant visa, a resident or permanent resident permit, or even its equivalent. Article 14 provides for the power and authority of the Secretary of Labor and Employment, where the Secretary of Labor and Employment can organize or establish a new employment offices in addition to those already established as employment offices all over the Philippines to facilitate the generation of employment within and even without the Philippines. Another is organization and establishment of a nationwide job clearances and even information system. And the Secretary of Labor and Employment, through its duly authorized representative, may also assist those relocated workers. They also require the employers and their organizations to submit their respective employment information through maybe a pro forma establishment report form, which you can download from the Department of Labor and Employment portal. Article 15 established the Bureau of Employment Services, which now replaced by the Bureau of Local Employment. And as you know, in general, the Bureau of Local Employment is the one that taking charge of generation of employment within the Philippines. Article 17 relates to the Overseas Employment Development Board. And the function of this Overseas Employment Development Board is now under the Philippine Overseas Employment Administration. The Philippine Overseas Employment Administration is the one taking charge of the licensing and regulation of this private recruitment entity and private fee charging employment agency. They're the one that will issue license and authority. License for the private fee charging employment agency and authority for the private recruitment entity. Article 18 talks about the direct hiring, where as a general rule, direct hiring is not allowed. The hiring of all overseas employees must pass through the private fee charging employment agency or the private recruitment entity. The only exception is that when the diplomatic corps is being hired, or the international organizations, or even our outside offices like the Philippine Overseas Labor Office and even the Labor Attache, the assistant of the Labor Attache can be directly hired without passing through the private fee charging employment agency and the private recruitment entity. Articles 19 and 20 talks about the offices of Immigrant Affairs, which is now assumed by the Commission on Filipino Overseas and the National Seamen Board, which now taken over by the Philippine Overseas Employment Administration. The Commission on Filipino Overseas is the one that monitors the remittances of these overseas Filipino workers to their families, to their dependents, and even beneficiaries within the Philippines. Article 21 talks about the general functions of a labor attaché. The labor attaché is just like, or he can be likened, or she can be likened to a secretary of labor, but their jurisdictions are outside the Philippines. So they can do anything which the Secretary of Labor can do within the Philippines. They're just the duly authorized representative of the Secretary of Labor. The main function of the labor attaché will provide assistance to the overseas Filipino workers. They have to ensure that these overseas Filipino workers are not exploited nor discriminated by the foreign employer. They assist the POEA in the evaluation of the standard employment contract to see to it that it is within the caliber of an international standard. They also conduct labor education and even research or studies to determine the impact or the effectivity of deploying workers abroad. Article 22 provides or states that all OFW are required or mandated to remit a portion of their foreign exchange earnings or income ranging from 50% to 80% to their families, dependents, and or beneficiaries within the Philippines. And as I have said a while ago, the Commission on Filipino Overseas is the one monitoring this responsibility. I hope you learn again, even in my own little way of discussing the introductory part of Book 1 of the Labor Code on Pre-Employment, particularly relating to the recruitment and placement of workers without the Philippines. And I hope to see you again in discussing the second part of the recruitment and placement or the pre-employment labor provisions under the Labor Code. Thank you and have a good day.